The city of Abuja was a maze of movement, car horns blaring, vendors shouting, tires screeching, and lives unfolding in hundreds of thousands of small ways each day. But for Daniel, a boy of only 14, every day was about survival. He had no home, no bed, no food most days. His world was an unforgiving stretch of dusty streets, hard pavements, and the faintest hope that tomorrow might be better. With no parents, no guardian, and no name in any school register, Daniel had learned early that the city had no time for boys like him. Every morning, he rose from under the same bridge where he had slept, the cold concrete pressing against his bones, and he shook the stiffness from his small body. He wore the same clothes daily, threadbare shorts, a faded t-shirt, and no shoes. His toes were caked in the reddish-brown dust of the streets, and his shoulders bore the weight of a large, torn sack that swung behind him as he walked. Daniel scavenged for a living. Scrap metal, plastic bottles, broken utensils, anything that could be sold at a local recycling depot for a few naira. Some days, he earned enough to buy a small plate of beans or a piece of bread. Other days, his stomach made sounds louder than the market women's voices. Still, he never gave up. Daniel's spirit was tired but not broken. On a particularly hot morning, with the sun already biting into his skin by 8 a.m., Daniel made his rounds through the market. He walked past the stalls where women shouted about fresh tomatoes and fish. He smiled gently and asked if anyone had leftover food. "Away, beggar boy!" one woman snapped, waving a fly swatter at him. He didn't reply. He simply bowed his head and kept moving. Behind a banana stall, he noticed a group of boys, the ones who sometimes share a corner of the bridge with him at night, eating roasted corn. One of them dropped a piece, and Daniel waited until they left before crawling to pick it up. Just as he raised it to his lips, a street dog darted by and snatched it from his hand. He didn't cry. Daniel had learned long ago that tears were a luxury, but his heart sank. He wandered to the back of a local restaurant, the place where kitchen waste was dumped. The stench was powerful, but so was a rumble in his stomach. Digging carefully, he found it, a half-eaten bowl of rice and beans, not too spoiled. "Thank you, God," he whispered, rinsing the food under a trickling pipe and sitting beside a dumpster. Just as he lifted a spoonful to his mouth, he heard a sound, a soft thud, like someone collapsing. Daniel stood, clutching the bowl, and looked around the dumpster. A woman was lying there, her clothes dusty, her face soaked in sweat. Her belly was swollen. She was heavily pregnant. "Madam," he asked, stepping forward, "are you okay?" She didn't answer. Her lips were dry. Her hands trembled. Daniel hesitated, then knelt and gently touched her forehead. Her skin was cold. He looked at the bowl in his hand, his only meal in 2 days. Then he looked at her belly. Without thinking, he began to feed her, piece by piece, with his fingers. "Please eat, madam. You need strength," he whispered. The woman opened her eyes slowly. She saw a thin, dusty boy with tired eyes and a kindness that didn't match his poverty. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. "Because I know what hunger feels like," he replied. The woman wept as she ate. She slowly sat up with his help. "My name is Linda," she said, her voice trembling. Daniel gave a faint smile. "I'm Daniel." From her small bag, Linda pulled out a business card, bent but clean. "Take this. If you ever need help, find me." Daniel couldn't read all the words, but he saw her name, Linda, and in his heart, something warm flickered. He helped her up, watched her disappear into the crowd, and returned to his routine, his sack on his back, his stomach still empty. But that day, for the first time, Daniel didn't feel invisible. He had made a choice, and though he had nothing, he had given everything. That card, folded in his pocket, became his treasure. Little did Daniel know, that card would one day open a door he never imagined possible. The woman who disappeared. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned into months. Life for Daniel continued. The same bridge, the same dust, the same hunger. But the card stayed with him, folded and safely tucked into the pocket of his sack. The business card with the name Linda, written in soft cursive, was more than paper. It was proof that someone had seen him. Someone had called him by name. Someone had given him hope. He sometimes looked at it in the dim light of street lamps, sounding out the few letters he could recognize. He whispered, "One day I'll find you." But Abuja was a vast city, and Daniel had no address, no phone, no way to trace the kind woman who had disappeared into the crowd. He returned to the restaurant dumpster a few times, hoping to catch a glimpse of her again, but there was no sign. Not in the market, not on the streets, nowhere. Maybe she had gone far. Maybe she had not survived. Or maybe she had forgotten him. One particularly cold evening, Daniel crouched under the bridge, hugging his knees tightly. His sack lay beside him, half full with scrap metal and rusted tins. He hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon, and his stomach ached. But even more than hunger, he felt an emptiness inside that night, a quiet ache for something more than survival. A family, a friend, a future. A distant car horn jolted him from thought, and he rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. "Tomorrow," he mumbled, "tomorrow I'll find more bottles. Maybe enough to buy rice." The next day, the city seemed louder than usual. At a busy intersection near was Market, Daniel spotted a crushed oil drum near a mechanic's shop. That would fetch a good price. He tightened his grip on the sack and began crossing the road. A screech, a flash of light, a loud thump. Everything turned black. Crowds gathered. "That boy," a woman cried. "He's the one who picks bottles around here." Someone flagged a taxi. Blood trickled from Daniel's forehead. His sack sprawled on the road. Bottles shattered like his bones. He was rushed to St. Grace Hospital. Inside the hospital, doctors worked quickly. Daniel was unconscious, his breathing shallow, his chest rising only slightly with each breath. Machines beeped. Bandages were wrapped around his head. Then she walked in. Nurse Linda Maxwell had just returned from a long shift in the maternity ward. She was tired. Her back ached. She had spent the past few years rebuilding her life from scratch, studying, working night shifts, raising her daughter alone. But nothing prepared her for what she saw when she stepped into the emergency room. The boy lying on the hospital bed. She froze. The dust on his face. The tired lines, even in sleep. The scar on his forehead. The quiet, aching innocence in his posture. Even now, her hand flew to her mouth. Daniel, a doctor beside her, raised a brow. "You know him?" Tears welled in her eyes. She stepped forward and touched his bandaged hand. "Yes," she whispered. "He once gave me his only meal when he had nothing." The doctor gave a quiet nod. "Then I'll leave him in your care." For hours, Linda didn't move from Daniel's bedside. She sat in silence, remembering that day behind a restaurant dumpster. The moment a boy fed her when the world turned away. The moment her strength returned, not from money, not from a hospital, but from a child's kindness. "You saved me once," she whispered. "Now I'll save you." She cleaned his wounds, adjusted the foredrip, and made sure his breathing was steady. When other nurses rotated out, she stayed. Day after day. On the fifth morning, just before sunrise, Daniel stirred. His fingers twitched. His eyes opened, slowly, hazily. Linda leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Daniel," she whispered. He blinked, dazed. Where am I?" "You're safe," she said, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You're in a hospital. You've been hurt." He turned to her face, confused. But then, a flicker of recognition. "You, behind the dumpster. You were pregnant," he murmured. She nodded, smiling through her tears. "Yes, and you gave me food. I never forgot." Daniel looked around and back at her. "You didn't forget me?" "I couldn't," she said, brushing his hair gently. "Because of you, my daughter's alive." Then her voice softened. "Her name is Zuri." Daniel's lips trembled. "Zuri." That name sounded like music. "But I'm still the same," he whispered. "I have nothing." Linda shook her head. "You have more than most. You gave when you had nothing. That's everything." For the first time in years, Daniel felt peace. But what he didn't know was that Linda had a secret of her own, something she had never told anyone, not even Zuri, because a man who had abandoned her while she was pregnant was none other than Mr. Maxwell, one of the most powerful men in the city, and Daniel's biological father. Daniel remained in the hospital for 2 more weeks. His wounds healed slowly, but it was a care, not just a medicine, that stitched him back together. And Linda, the woman he had once fed behind a dumpster, was now feeding him, caring for him, and staying by his side like family. Each morning, she arrived with warm soup and fresh clothes. Each evening, she read to him from books she borrowed from the children's ward. The bond between them deepened, not as nurse and patient, but as 2 survivors bound by something stronger than blood, gratitude. And then came the day the doctor gave him the news. "Daniel, you're well enough to leave," the doctor said with a kind smile. Daniel's eyes darkened. He looked down at his hands, now clean but still thin. "Leave? But where would I go?" Linda entered the room just as he spoke those words. She had a small bag of fruit and a bright smile. "You're coming with me," she said simply. Daniel stared at her, stunned. To your house?" "Yes," she said. "You saved me once. I've just been returning the favor. Now, let me give you something more a home." The journey to Linda's apartment was quiet. Daniel sat in the taxi beside her, his eyes wide as they passed neighborhoods he'd never dared to enter. Tree-lined streets, children playing, windows with curtains. When they arrived, Daniel stepped into a world he never knew existed. A clean 2-room flat with a small balcony, a fridge, books on shelves, and a gentle scent of cooked stew in the air. It wasn't fancy, but it was peace. Then a little girl ran from the hallway, her tiny arms wrapping around Linda's legs. "Mommy, who's that?" she asked, hiding behind her. Linda smiled. "Zuri, this is Daniel. Long ago, when you were still in my belly, he saved our lives." Zuri peeked out with her big brown eyes, walked up to Daniel, and said shyly, "Thank you." Daniel's knees went weak. This was a baby from that day. He knelt slowly. "Your name?" "Zuri." Linda nodded. "It means beautiful in Swahili. I gave it to her because that's what she is, and because she survived something that should have broken us both." That night, Daniel slept in a real bed. He ate dinner at a table. He laughed for the first time in years. And tucked under his new pillow was the old, bent business card, the only piece of his past he had kept. Weeks passed. Daniel found joy in the simplest things. Washing dishes, going to the market with Linda, reading Zuri bedtime stories. He even began using her school books to teach himself how to read. And then one morning, Linda gave him surprising news. "I spoke to a friend of mine," she said. "He owns a recycling company. He's offering you a real job, sorting bottles and scrap. It starts next week." "A real job?" Daniel's voice cracked. She smiled. "Yes, real uniform, real pay, real future." He hugged her, tight, grateful, overwhelmed. That night, as Zuri slept, Linda sat alone on the balcony, staring into the distance. Her heart ached with a truth she had buried deep. She whispered it into the air. "You're his son, Daniel. He left me, and he never knew about you." Back in the mansion district of Abuja, Mr. Maxwell, wealthy, powerful, feared, sat in his polished office, flipping through documents. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Sir," said his assistant, "there's a request for funding from St. Grace Hospital." A nurse named Linda Maxwell signed it. Mr. Maxwell's hand froze. That name. He leaned forward. "Did you say Linda Maxwell?" "Yes, sir. She's requesting sponsorship for underprivileged patients." Mr. Maxwell stood, his face unreadable. "Approve it." That weekend, Linda sat Daniel down. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice trembling. "It's about your past, about who you are." Daniel looked up, puzzled. "You see, many years ago, before I met you, I was married to a man named Maxwell." Daniel blinked. "Wait, Maxwell? Like the name on TV? The company's?" Linda nodded. "Yes, that Maxwell. I was his wife, and I was pregnant when I left." The silence between them was thick. "I never told him about the baby. I left with nothing, and that baby was born on the street. Her name was not Zuri." Daniel looked at her, eyes wide. Linda took a deep breath. Daniel, you're not just any boy. You're my son. The world spun. The boy from the bridge. The bottle picker. The forgotten shadow of the city was the heir of one of Abuja's richest men. And neither of them knew that Mr. Maxwell had already started investigating the woman who once disappeared from his life, and would soon discover the son he never knew he had. The sun rose slowly over Abuja, casting gold across rooftops and reflecting in Daniel's stunned eyes. He sat motionless on the couch, the air thick with silence. Across from him, Linda watched him closely, her hands twisting the edge of her wrapper. "You remind my mother?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, tears clinging to her lashes. "Yes, I didn't recognize you that day behind the restaurant. I was too weak, too broken. But when I saw you in the hospital and then looked into your eyes, I knew. I had carried those eyes inside me for 9 months." Daniel leaned back slowly, trying to breathe. "So all these years, I wasn't alone. I had a mother, and I didn't even know." Linda moved closer, gently taking his hand. "I didn't know you'd survived. I collapsed that day and woke up in a small clinic. I thought you were gone, lost in the crowd. It broke me. I searched. I asked, but I didn't have your name, Daniel. And you never used your last name." He blinked, remembering. "Because I didn't have one." They both fell silent. Then Daniel spoke again. "And him?" he asked, jaw tightening. "Mr. Maxwell?" Linda's eyes dimmed. "He doesn't know. About you. He never did. Would he care?" Daniel's voice was bitter now. She sighed. "He's a powerful man, Daniel. Proud. Cold. But you're nothing like him. Your heart is bigger than his fortune." Daniel turned away, the weight of it all pressing on him like a mountain. He had never craved a last name, but now he had one, and it belonged to a man who had abandoned his mother and denied his existence. Meanwhile, at Maxwell Holdings, Mr. Maxwell reviewed a file on his desk. It had taken 2 weeks of silent searching, but he had found Linda. The background check report was thick. St. Grace Hospital, registered nurse. 2-room apartment in Abuja, 1 child, daughter, age 9. The photo of Zuri was paper-clipped to the page. Maxwell's breath caught. She looked like him. The same nose, the same eyes. He sat back in his chair, stunned. "She had my child," he murmured, "and never told me." He flipped to the next page. A recent hospital report. Boy injured in a road accident. Name, Daniel. Listed under Linda's care. No formal relation documented. Then something else. A copy of the hospital's internal memo. Patient Daniel listed as dependent. Residing with nurse Linda Maxwell since discharge. Maxwell's chest tightened. 2 children? He wondered aloud. Or just one? A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Sir," said his assistant, "should we initiate legal action for parental rights?" Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "No, not yet." For the first time in years, the great Maxwell felt something unfamiliar. Regret. Back at Linda's home, things changed. Daniel struggled to process the truth. He distanced himself emotionally, walking longer routes to work, often eating quietly. Zuri noticed. "Why isn't Daniel smiling anymore, Mommy?" she asked one evening. Linda kissed her forehead. "Because sometimes when your heart finds something it didn't know it lost, it takes time to feel whole again." That night, Daniel sat on the balcony alone. He looked up at the stars and clutched the old business card that had led him here. A dirty, bent scrap of paper that had become the key to his past. Suddenly, a black car rolled to a slow stop across the street. Daniel squinted. A man stepped out. Tall, broad, expensive suit, dark sunglasses. Even at dusk, he approached the gate and rang the bell. Daniel tensed. Linda answered the door and froze. "Maxwell," she breathed. "Hello, Linda," he said, voice calm but cold. "I need to speak with you." "And the boy?" Daniel stepped into view. Maxwell's eyes flicked to him. The air became ice. Inside, the three sat in silence. Maxwell stared at Daniel like he was a puzzle missing its final piece. Daniel, meanwhile, stared right back, shoulders squared, defiant. The resemblance was undeniable. Same jaw, same gaze. "So," Maxwell said finally, "you're my son." "I didn't ask to be," Daniel replied. Linda opened her mouth, but Maxwell held up a hand. "I came here because I owe the truth. To both of you. Linda," you left without a word. "You cheated. You lied." She shot back. "I walked away to protect my child from becoming cold and cruel like you." Maxwell blinked, stunned by her sharpness. Daniel stood. "I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I have a life now. A family. I have Zuri. I have her." Maxwell's lips thinned. "So, you don't want anything from me?" Daniel stepped closer. "You want to know what I want? I want to be the kind of man who gives away his only meal to a stranger. That's enough for me." Silence. And then Maxwell chuckled. Not a cruel laugh, but a strange, small sound of disbelief. "You're exactly like her," he muttered. He rose and pulled something from his coat pocket. "A checkbook. I came prepared to offer you everything. An estate. A company share. Your rightful inheritance." Daniel stepped back. Maxwell met his eyes. "But now, I realize I have nothing to offer you that you haven't already earned." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "If ever you want to know more, come see me. Not because of what I have, but because of who you are." He left, and for the first time, Daniel didn't feel abandoned. He felt chosen, not by a man, but by the life he built with his own hands. The sun spilled into the small apartment, filtering through thin curtains and warming Daniel's face. He stood by the window, watching Zuri play with her dolls on the floor. Linda moved quietly in the kitchen, humming as she prepared breakfast. The scent of fried plantain drifted through the air. It had been 2 weeks since Mr. Maxwell's visit, but his shadow still lingered in Daniel's thoughts. He hadn't spoken much about it, not to Linda, not to Zuri. But every night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the words echoed, "You're my son." He didn't know what to do with that truth. One morning, while Daniel was at work, his manager at the recycling center pulled him aside. "There's a man outside. Said he wants to speak to you," the manager said. "Black car, expensive suit. You know him?" Daniel's stomach dropped. He stepped outside. It wasn't Maxwell. It was a lawyer. "Mr. Daniel," the man said, smiling politely. "I come with a message from Maxwell Holdings. Mr. Maxwell has placed your name in his private legacy trust. You now hold 15% of his personal business shares and partial ownership of Maxwell Foundation, a charity fund he created 2 years ago. He says it's your choice what you do with it." Daniel blinked. "Why would he?" "He said it's not a gift. It's your birthright." The lawyer handed him a file. "This is yours. No pressure. No strings. If you wish to walk away, we'll understand. But if you choose to accept, Mr. Maxwell has also asked if you consider joining the Foundation's Youth Outreach Board." Daniel didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "Tell him I'll think about it." That evening, Daniel sat with Linda in the living room, the document resting in his lap. "I don't want to become him," Daniel said quietly. "You won't," Linda said, placing a hand over his, "because your heart is different, because you earned your values without money, and that makes all the difference." He nodded slowly. "If I join the Foundation, I want to build something, a shelter, a place where no boy sleeps under a bridge again." Linda smiled. "Then do it. Use the name to change the story." 1 year later, the city buzzed with excitement as the ribbon was cut at the opening ceremony of the Zuri Home for Street Children, a sprawling center with dormitories, a clinic, classrooms, and a kitchen that never closed. News crews captured the moment, snapping pictures of the young man in a sharp white shirt and black shoes, standing beside a smiling little girl holding the scissors. The banner above them read, "From the streets to strength, a legacy of grace." Reporters gathered as Daniel stepped up to the microphone. He cleared his throat. "My name is Daniel Maxwell. I grew up without a name, without a bed, without a family. I once ate behind dumpsters and slept beside flies. But today, I stand here because someone chose to feed me when I was forgotten, Her name is Linda, my mother, and she taught me that love is more powerful than wealth." The crowd applauded. "And this," he continued, gesturing to the building, "is not charity. It's redemption. It's where boys and girls like me get a second chance. A place where they're not invisible. Not anymore." As the cheers grew louder, Daniel stepped back and pulled Zuri close. She hugged him, giggling as cameras flashed. And watching from the distance, behind tinted glass in a sleek black car, sat Mr. Maxwell. For once, he didn't feel powerful. He felt humbled. He tapped his driver lightly. "He did it. Without me." The driver nodded. "Would you like to speak to him, sir?" Maxwell hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet. Today belongs to him." That night, as Daniel stood on the balcony of the now larger apartment he shared with Linda and Zuri, he gazed at the stars. He wasn't rich in the way his father was, but he was rich in the way that mattered. In peace, in purpose, in people. He turned as Zuri came out and wrapped her small arms around him. "Big brother," she said. "Are you happy?" Daniel looked down at her and smiled. "I am." And for the first time, not just in the eyes of others, but in his own heart, Daniel was no longer the bottle boy of the street. He was a son, a brother, a builder of hope, and a name that once meant nothing, now meant everything. Final note to the audience. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the seed of the greatest transformation. Don't look down on anyone. The boy you ignore today may build a shelter your son will find tomorrow. And the pain you survive can become the light someone else walks by. If this story touched your heart, share it. Let kindness go full circle. Thank you